So here we go. Judges, the epilogue. This is like the ending part of Judges, the last like 4 or 5 chapters all in one. We started off with the prologue, and now here we are at the epilogue. Prologue and the epilogue are like the bookends of Judges, and the character stories were like the meat of it. And here we are, sort of at the end, the epilogue. And we won't be surprised, although we will be disappointed because it's more of the downward spiral. Things just keep getting more and more out of control. And the things that happen in the prologue, we see them being exponentially worse in the epilogue. We'll have the same political decline and religious decline, and it's just worse now. Much, much worse. So let's jump into this. So, questions from last time. How does the epilogue and the prologue compare? Well, one of the things we see happening in the prologue is that the people take on the foreign gods of the foreign nations. Now you have a tribe setting up its own religion. So it gets worse. Not just are you taking on foreign gods, you're making your own gods. This is worse. Another question I asked is, what is the solution for the atrocity with the Levite's concubine? Well, the Levite's concubine was raped to death, right? And their solution to this atrocity is to go to battle with these people, and it ends up almost nearly annihilating a tribe in Israel, the tribe of Benjamin. And their rectification for this is to give the men of the tribe of Benjamin, the 600 men that are left, wives from other places in Israel so that they can repopulate, which is the abduction of young women to repopulate Benjamin, which is essentially the rape of hundreds of young women to repopulate the tribe of Benjamin. So the first act of rape, their solution is the rape of hundreds of women. So it's just an atrocity on top of an atrocity. It's just the epitome of the downward spiral. Things just keep getting worse and worse. So we're going to see that happening in the second part of the epilogue today. So what we learned previously, the demise of Samson. Samson loved the Philistine women. He lived like a Philistine, disregarding his Nazirite vows and what made him an Israelite man. And he walked among the Philistines, and he died with them as well. Samson was essentially like a Philistine king, and so he's treated like it. And we see that worldly problems dealt with in worldly ways, well, yield worldly results. And it's no surprise. It's disappointing, but it's no surprise, because we see here the principle of sowing and reaping working out very well. What is sown in the prologue is reaped in the epilogue. What has been sown throughout the character stories have been reaped. And Samson is sort of the reaping of Israel. And here in the epilogue, we see on a corporate or national scale the reaping. So let's get right into it. The religious decline. So this is like your people to God relationship. And this is like chapter 17 and 18. Let's go into the scripture here. Let's see. Yep, that's showing up. Judges 17:1. There was a man in the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. And notice here, a lot of things are happening in the hill country of Ephraim. Verse 2, he said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and even spoke it in my hearing, that silver is in my possession. I took it, but now I will return it to you." And his mother said, "May my son be blessed by Yahweh." So here we learn that Micah stole 1,100 pieces of silver from his mother, and his mother spoke a curse about it, right? So he's now giving it back to her, and his mother saying, "Be blessed by Yahweh." This is a little weird, a little awkward, but okay, whatever. Verse 3, then he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother, and his mother said, "I consecrate the silver to Yahweh from my hand for my son, to make an idol of cast metal." Oh, here it is. Misunderstanding. I consecrate silver to Yahweh to make an idol? You think that would please Yahweh? No. Verse 4, so when he returned the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver. Notice it's not even how much was it? 1,100 pieces? Yeah, 1,100 pieces. It's just 200. Well, you said you consecrated it to him, to Yahweh, but not all of it. So she took the 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made it into an idol of cast metal, and it was in the house of Micah. So they make an idol, and they think, well, we suppose that they think Yahweh is going to be happy about this. I mean, come on. Have they not been reading Judges? This man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and a teraphim, and installed one of his sons who became his priest. So here we see things exacerbating. Not only do they have an idol, but they're now doing worship and installing a priest. So it's like their own religion. They're setting up their own religion here. Verse 6, in those days, and this is the key verse, in those days, there was no king in Israel. All the people did what was right in their own eyes. So we see these things happening here. Verse 6, their actions are wrong. They're doing what is right in their own eyes. And in a few more verses, we're going to read that their understanding is wrong. Let's just go ahead and get to that. So their actions are wrong, right? Because they're doing what is right in their own eyes. We know that because they're consecrating the silver to Yahweh to make an idol. Yahweh would not like that. So their actions are wrong. Verse 7, now there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the clan of Judah. He was a Levite residing there. So he's someone set apart for religious duty. Verse 8, this man left the town of Bethlehem in Judah to live where he could find a place. So he's looking for work, which is really odd because Levites are assigned work. He came to the house of Micah in the hill country of Ephraim to carry out on his work. Micah said to him, from where do you come? He replied, I am a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to live wherever I can find a place. Then Micah said to him, stay with me, and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, a set of clothes, and your living. So you come work for me as a priest, and I'll give you your living and some money and stuff. Verse 11, the Levite agreed to stay with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. So Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, now I know that Yahweh will prosper me, because the Levite has become my priest. Oh, Micah, no. Micah does not have a right understanding here. Why would he think that Yahweh would prosper him when he finds this priest to run his religion that he made out of silver that he stole from his mother? Like, none of this is making sense. Because Micah doesn't understand. He doesn't understand that this would be displeasing to Yahweh. Instead, he thinks that Yahweh's blessing him and prospering him because this Levite has just so happened to come upon him and decided to be his priest, but this just isn't the case. What's happening here is because they're doing what is right in their own eyes, they don't realize what they're doing is wrong. Micah and the Levite, and really Micah's mother too. Their actions are wrong. Their understanding is wrong. They don't realize what they are doing is wrong because Israel is reaping what it has sown, and they have not been teaching their children and themselves well. And they're not doing what is pleasing in Yahweh's sight, even though they are ascribing their blessings, so to speak, to Yahweh. Right? He's thinking that this Levite happening upon his house is a blessing from God. No, it's not, because the Levite's out of place too. And so we see this happening here. And this source sort of sets up what's happening next in Judges 18. And again, this phrase is going to happen a lot in the epilogue, but it's an important one. In those days, there was no king in Israel, right? So it's basically, this is like the Wild West. It's lawless. In those days, there was no king in Israel. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking for itself a territory to live in. For until then, no territory among the tribes of Israel had been allotted to them. So the Danites sent 5 valiant men from the whole number of their clan, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, go explore the land. When they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they stayed there. So this sort of sets up and explains why the Danites are encountering Micah, because they're moving from where they were into that place. So let's look at a map real quick. So here's a map. Oh, wow, you can't really see that very well. Zoom in again. So here's a map. Here's where the tribe of Dan is supposed to be. This is in the territory of the Philistines, but we know the Philistines are there because we just read the Samson story, and Samson's near Zorah and Timnah, and they push the Danites out. So the Danites are being pushed out, and so they're going to relocate, and they're coming. Let me just back out a little bit. So right here's where the tribe of Dan is. They're coming back up this way through the territory of Ephraim, through the hill country, right? That's where they encounter Micah. And they're eventually going to end up all the way up here in the north, up here in the city of Dan, which is Laish, but they conquer it and rename it Dan. So they're way out of position. Their inheritance is down here by the Philistines, but they get kicked out. And this is significant because the further we move north in our geography and Judges, the more out of place people are, the deeper the downward spiral, so to speak. So Dan is in the process of relocating because they can't hold their place here. So we see that happening. That's why they came across in the hill country Ephraim, the house of Micah. So let's continue to read on here. While they were at Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So they went over and asked him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here?" Because remember, this Levite is from Bethlehem, and Bethlehem is sort of in the area where the Danites would be in. Verse 4. He said to them, "Micah did such and such for me, and he hired me, and I have become his priest." Verse 5. Then they said to him, "Inquire of God that we may know whether the mission we are undertaking will succeed." Because remember, they're displaced. They're trying to find a place to live. They're going towards the north. They're searching for a place. They want God's approval. But from the beginning of this encounter with Micah and all this stuff, can we trust what this priest is going to say or what's going to happen? Because they're worshiping an idol. No, we cannot trust it. Anyways, let's carry on. Verse 6. The priest replied, "Go in peace. The mission you are on is under the eye of Yahweh." He's not lying when he says this, because Yahweh is the sovereign God of all the universe. He is the king in Israel. He is subduing Israel's enemies under their hand, right? So this is a true statement. It is under the eye of Yahweh, just not in the way that they think. Verse 7, the 5 men went on, and when they came to Laish, they observed the people who were there living securely, after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing on earth and possessing wealth. So this is where we saw on that map where it says Dan, but it's actually Laish because they conquered Laish and renamed the city Dan. But they're looking at these people and they're, what does it say? They're quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing on earth. They're peaceful people. Dan here, the tribe of Dan, is being set up as the villain because they kind of are the villain. They're supposed to inherit down near Simeon and Judah, but they're way out of place in the north. And so these quiet, unsuspecting people of Laish are innocent in all of this. Reading on. Furthermore, they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealing with Aram. So they lacked security. They lacked anyone to come to help them, these people of Laish. So Dan is really looking like the villain now. Verse 8, when they came to their kinsfolk at Zorah and Eshtaol, and those names should be familiar because we heard those in the Samson story. This is near the Philistine area. They said to them, "What do you report?" Verse 9, they said, "Come, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and it is very good. Will you do nothing? Do not be slow to go, but enter in and possess the land." Sounds kind of like Joshua's commissioning, right? "When you go, you will come to an unsuspecting people. The land is broad. God has indeed given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything on earth." Verse 11, 600 men of the Danite clan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol, and went up and encamped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. On this account, that place was called Mahanaim Dan. To this day, it is west of Kiriath Jearim. From there, they passed on to the hill country of Ephraim, so they're getting close to Micah's house. Oh, here we go. And came to the house of Micah. Verse 14, then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land, that is Laish, said to their comrades, "Do you know that in these buildings there is an ephod, a teraphim, and an idol of cast metal? Now therefore consider what you will do." So here you have the beginning of a tribe setting up their own religion, because they went through here when they passed through the first time, the 5 spies, and they knew that there was this here. And then now, as the conquering men are coming through, what are they going to do? They're going to stop at Micah's house and take what does not belong to them and what should not belong to them. And they're going to end up bringing more ruin and destruction upon themselves, because they're going to set up this own religion for the Danites instead of just for the house of Micah. Verse 15. So they turned in that direction and came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah and greeted him, while the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had gone to spy out the land proceeded to enter and take the idol of cast metal, the ephod, and the teraphim. The priest was standing by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. So they're taking it. Verse 18. When the young men went into Micah's house and took the idol of cast metal, the ephod, and the teraphim, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They said to him, "Keep quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us and be to us a father and a priest. That sounds familiar. That's what Micah said, right? Earlier. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one person or to be priest to a tribe and clan in Israel? So they're sitting here widening this Levite's eyes to say, is it better to be a priest to one guy or to a whole tribe, right? And so what's motivating him here is not the glory of Yahweh, which should be, but the praise of man, of making him renowned, right? This Levite. Verse 20, then the priest accepted the offer. Of course. We're not surprised, but we're disappointed. He took the ephod, the teraphim, the idol, and went along with the people. So they resumed their journey, putting the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them. When they were some distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were called out, and they overtook the Danites. So Micah hears about this, and he's going to go see what's up. Verse 23, they shouted to the Danites, who turned around and said to Micah, what is the matter that you have come with such a company? He replied, you take my gods that I made and the priest and go away, and what have I left? How can you ask me what's the matter? So Micah's like, what do you mean? You took all my stuff. How can you say to me what's going on? Verse 25, the Danites said to him, you had better not let your voice be heard among us, or else hot-tempered fellows will attack you, and you will lose your life and the lives of your household. So here you have threatening coming from the tribe of Dan, right? You better shut up and turn around, because if some people hear you, they're going to want to kill you. What does Dan do? Or excuse me, what does Micah do? Well, he does what any other smart person would do. He turns around. Verse 26, then the Danites went their way. When Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned back and went back to his home. The Danites, having taken what Micah had made, and the priests who belonged to him, came to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, put them to the sword, and burned down the city. So what do the mighty men of Dan do? They kill the quiet and unsuspecting people, the innocent people. Why? Because Dan is the villain. Because they're out of place. They haven't done what they're supposed to do. They're reaping what they've sown. Really, Israel's reaping what it's sown. And they are becoming the villain of the land. Verse 28. There was no deliverer. That's interesting because the Israelites are known for having deliverers, the judges, who deliver themselves or deliver their people up out of the hands of the foreign people. But here it's making a remark, there is no deliverer, right? For the people of Laish. There was no deliverer. Why? Because it was far from Sidon and they had no dealings with Aram. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. They rebuilt the city and lived in it, right? So they're going to name it Dan. Verse 29, they named the city Dan after their ancestor Dan, who was born in Israel. But the name of the city was formerly Laish. Then the Danites set up the idol for themselves. Oh, come on. It makes sense, though. But here's the shocker. Watch this next part. Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the time the land went into captivity. So they maintained as their own Micah's idol that he had made as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. What? What? The Danites set up the idol, okay. But that Levite, who was unnamed, who's from Bethlehem of Judah, it is no other than Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses. Moses' grandson. So what do we see happening here? The tribe of Dan is displaced from down in south near Simeon and Judah by the Philistines, and they find a new home amongst the quiet, unsuspecting people of Laish, and Dan becomes the villain. And he also takes Micah's idol and the priest and sets up their own religion up in the north, out of place, out of position. This is the downward spiral. Dan defeats these unsuspecting people, and they move from the south to the north, which is a key that they are out of position. And a new religion is established, led by Moses' grandson. I mean, none other than Moses. I mean, we know that Aaron was not faithful. Why? Because Aaron was the one who set up the golden calves when Moses was up the mountain, on Mount Sinai, receiving the Ten Commandments. So for us to hear that someone from the line of Moses is the one performing this, setting up their own religion with the idol for the Danites is just absolutely insane. This is the depth of the downward spiral. How could Moses' grandson, Moses, the faithful one for the most part, how could his grandson do such a thing? Of all the people who would have been taught the law, surely Moses' children and grandchildren. But apparently not. Because here we have it. Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, is the one who is priest to the tribe of the Danites. The one upholding the idol that they set up for themselves. This is supposed to absolutely slap you in the face. Because this should be unheard of. But this is the downward spiral. This is what happens when you reject Yahweh as king. Insane, crazy things like this can happen. Such misunderstanding too. Let's back up. Where was it? Verse 6, right? In those days there was no king in Israel, right? Yahweh wasn't exalted as king, and they really didn't have a human king. It was lawless, the Wild Wild West, and the people did what was right in their own eyes. And then verse 13, I know God has prospered me because he's brought this Levite to me. No, God has not prospered you, Micah. You've made a cast idol and are worshiping it. Yahweh is not behind that, but it's because you do not know or understand the ways of Yahweh that you think that this is somehow right, but it's not, because you're doing what's right in your own eyes. Because there's no king, not even Yahweh in Israel. Although he still is the sovereign king of Israel and over the whole world, they are not glorifying him and exalting him as king in Israel, because there was no king. And it was in those days that these things took place. And we see this happening all the way down here, that Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, is the one facilitating these things. The one out of everyone who should understand what's going on. He is the one who shows faithlessness. Because the priest line through Aaron was always sort of garbage to a certain extent. Aaron made the golden calves. Two of his sons, I think it's Nadab and Abihu, maybe. They're the ones that offer unholy fire before God, and God kills them. Right, so Aaron, his priest line, it's kind of iffy from the beginning. But Moses is supposed to be the good one, the faithful one for the most part. He's the one that intercedes for the people of Israel and says, God, please don't blot out this people, because then what are the people of the land going to say? That their God led them out here just to destroy them. So Moses advocates for the people. But here we have it. Moses' grandson is the one who maintains the idol for Micah. This is absolutely insane. This should not be happening, but it is. Because this is what happens when you reject Yahweh as your king. This is the depth of the downward spiral, and it only gets worse. Remember, this is the people to God relationship happening here. And we see here, on a whole, not only are people individually rejecting Yahweh and going after foreign gods, now you have whole tribes in Israel creating their own religion in place of Yahweh. This is a huge, huge problem. But this is what's happening, and it's led by none other than Moses' grandson, Jonathan, which is insane. The people truly have lost their way. They've become no different than the people of the land. And guess what? They will be treated just like the people of the land, since they're acting like it. This is the downward spiral. And this is how bad it gets. We're going to pick up with the political decline in the next one.